All right, guys, welcome back to another episode. Today we have a special guest, Mr. Lou Brown. He has been in the game for quite some time, and I'm excited to have him on. I definitely, if you haven't got a chance to hear him speak or cover, I mean, he puts a great perspective on real estate investing that most people kind of don't think about or utilize. So I'm excited to bring him on, and of course, Misty's with us today as well. But I think we just start at the top, and I always like to start with, you guys know, in interviews, I like to start with, what is it that got you started? How did you, origin stories, like where did it all start, Lou, and just kind of take it from the top.
Well, Christopher, this has been a wonderful journey. I'm over 40 years in the business. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I love to inspire people that are either just getting started or are in the business because I've been there and done that. I'm very, very blessed that I was able to not only get into real estate, but to buy my first property when I was 18 years old. And I haven't looked back since. I went full time in the business in 1983 and never have worked for anyone else since that time. So it's been a fun journey. And I'm very blessed that I was given the opportunity to do that. To answer your question, really, where did it come from was, well, my mother was a war bride, and she came over to this country as an immigrant on the Queen Mary. And back then, uh, World War II, the American troopers were saving Europe, and they went all over and they found their brides. And so the United States government commissioned the Queen Mary to bring over the war brides, and they would settle in this country. My mother went through a 5-year process of becoming a naturalized American citizen, something they don't do these days, but definitely it was a process to become a member of this country and a citizen of this country. She did that. And unfortunately, though, she had met her American trooper husband. Everything was going to be fantastic. But turns out when she got here, she found out he was an alcoholic and an abuser. So she left that relationship, and then she met my father, her second mistake. So it ended up just being the two of us on this journey, kind of raising each other in this process. And I tell you, it was a process because we had no money. In fact, our dining table was a Samsonite card table. If you can imagine a card table with metal chairs, we bought that with S&H green stamps. Back in the day when you bought groceries or gasoline, they gave you stamps as an incentive, and you put them in books. And then you took these books to a redemption center and you actually got merchandise for it. So it was kind of like the Bitcoin of the day, or the frequent flyer program of the day. And so it was interesting because that's actually how we were able to furnish our apartment, was with
Oh, wow.
those green stamp books. And so it was a journey. And imagine having no money, no background, no experience, no credit, no kind of anything to build upon. Sometimes people are building because they have an inheritance or they have parents that are helping them out, but didn't have any of that. And it turned out to be a wonderful blessing. Well, long about 8 years old, of course, my mother, she had all of her friends. And so I circulated among a lot of adults when I was a kid. And one of her friends actually told me when I was 8 years old, she told me that she had bought the duplex that she lived in. And she told me the people on one side were paying enough money to cover the mortgage, and that meant they were living there for free. So here we were hiding out from the rent man, banging on the door and saying, "Hey, I want to collect the rent." My mother's saying, "Shh, don't answer the door." and here they are living for free. So that's when I discovered that there's parallel universes. There's the people with knowledge and the people without knowledge. And so I started watching Aunt Mabel and Uncle George. And by the way, they were no relation to me. I had no relations in this country at all. No brothers, no sisters, no cousins, no uncles, no aunts, no grandparents. There was nobody in this country to support us, help us, guide us, or give us information. It was just kind of like winging it. And so here they were, doing the world. I mean, then the next year they bought another duplex next door, and they told me the people on one side were paying enough to cover the mortgage, and the other money was theirs. And then they bought another one and another one and another one, all on the same street that they lived on. And I just was enthralled in that, because they started going on trips and vacations, cruises, all kinds of things, buying a brand new car every other year, and really living a good life. And then along about 16, Aunt Mabel calls me and she says, "Hey, come over here and help me move." I said, "Move where?" She said, "A brand new house in a brand new subdivision, all brick home on a corner lot." And I said, "Aunt Mabel, how did you do this?" And she said two words that changed my life. She said, "Accumulate property." And I've never forgotten that. And that's exactly what I do to this day, is purchase properties that can produce income. So I'm a very big believer in the concept of dependable, predictable monthly income, because when do your bills come due? They come due every month, right? So if you can get income producing property, then you're going to be on a trajectory for success. So that gives you a little bit of background there.
I gotta ask, so when you said Queen Mary, we're talking about the same Queen Mary that's in California right now, that's a hotel?
That is the one.
That's awesome. Some people
It
don't know that. Like
actually
I've seen
it
I've been around that just the area. I know the area. I've been around the Queen Mary and stuff, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's the same one.
That's the same one, and it is docked. It's dry docked there as a tourist attraction, because of all the people that came over on the Queen Mary to actually settle this country. And I've stayed several times at that Hyatt right across the
Yes.
street.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Misty set me up in the Hyatt one year for one of my jujitsu competitions, and I was like, "That's the Queen Mary," and so that's crazy to know. So your mom came over on that exact boat that's still there, that's docked. That's awesome. And
And
so
they
you
actually had the wooden handrails, and they carved their initials in the wooden handrails.
oh
I
wow,
don't know where hers was, but
that's awesome. So
they
so growing up, so you said you're 8 years old. You saw it. Obviously, sometimes 8 years old we don't really pay attention to it, and if something clicked for you that just said, "Huh, there's more to this." And then that's when you really started paying attention to kinda so about when did you? Because you said 18 is when you bought the first house, right? You bought your
no,
first
yeah,
house and you were
yeah.
18. So, those years of I guess between, your teenage years, is that when you kinda really started to pay more and more attention and, seeing more things and kinda how did that work between those years? I asked that because that's not a normal thing for people. Some people, they don't discover this. I'm sure the people you've dealt with, they're in their 40s and 50s, and they're like, "I gotta retire," versus someone who's 18, they're like, "Okay, they're thinking about this." So, what about those teenage years? What was that like for you,
Well,
kinda growing up? Would you that
you just imagine that your life is revolves around hand-me-downs, adults giving you their clothes, and you just don't have enough money to do anything. So you start to pay attention to money, and you start to notice that other people have it and you don't. And there was really no path for me to learn that, because, of course, I didn't have parents that knew those kind of things. So all I could do is really pay attention to Aunt Mabel. And you never know who your mentors are going to be, what form they're going to come in, what age they're going to come in. So Aunt Mabel was like 4 foot tall and 4 foot wide. And she spoke with a lisp. He talked like this. And when he talked like this, you had to listen, because if you didn't listen, you didn't understand what she was saying. So, so you never know who your mentors are going to be. And then here she shows up and she starts talking to me. And then she says, at 18, she says to me, "You need to buy a house." And I said, "Buy a house, Aunt Mabel? You go to banks and qualify for loans, and you buy your duplexes. I can't qualify my way out of a paper bag. What are you talking about?" And she says, I don't know, but you need to meet my friend, Realtor Sue. So sure enough, blue-haired lady comes up in her big Cadillac. She can't hardly see over the steering wheel. And she comes and picks me up at 18 years old. And she's going to take me around looking at properties like I'm going to buy a house or something. But she knew something that Aunt Mabel didn't know. She knew about, back in the day, they had a thing called NENQ loans. That's non-escalating, non-qualifying financing, where you could step in for $45. You could take over someone else's loan and you could literally take over their payments. So if they were 15 years into a 30-year loan, that's where you picked up and you just kept making those payments. And so she knew that, and she knew that through my paper routes and things, I had saved up a little bit of money. And so she said, okay, let's try for this. So sure enough, she found a house just like that. And it was a beautiful all brick home on a corner lot and just perfect. And so sure enough, I was able to take over that existing financing, and I put it under contract right before my birthday. And after my birthday, we closed on it. So I was 19 when I actually closed. And I asked my mother, do you want to be a tenant? Do you want to move in? And at the time, we were paying $600 a month in rent. And I said, Mom, if you could pay me $100 a month and wash some clothes and cook some meals, I said, then you could take the other $500 and put it towards your debt. You see, she had gotten tied up in the cycle of and the mentality of the right now. And if Christmas was coming, she would borrow money so that I could have a good Christmas. And she would do things that weren't, financially intelligent. And she would just spend money, and money was something to be spent. And if you didn't have it, you spent it anyway. That was sort of like her thinking. But she was Scottish. She came over from Scotland. And so she did teach me thriftiness, and she did teach me penny pinching, but still she didn't understand money. And so the thing was, it was really a challenge for her. And so what I said was, I want you to get rid of this 22% interest loan shark nonsense. And so sure enough, a year and a half later, she was free and clear for the rest of her life. Well, along about that time, because I opted out of college, I went to college for 1 year on a scholarship from Junior Achievement. Junior Achievement's awesome. And they were paying for 1 year. So I went to the local community college, and I couldn't figure out why I was there, because really I wasn't figuring that I was learning anything that I could actually use in my future. And so I exited college. I just didn't go back. And it's not that I was kicked out, or I just didn't go back. I just didn't re-register. And I started looking for a job. And sure enough, I found a commission sales job, and I was able to start making some money. So I was anxious. I was ready, willing, and able. And I was going to do pretty much whatever it took to get there. So that worked out for me. And then I was able to buy a store, and we actually bought a store with wicker and rattan furniture with another couple. We actually got that financed from the seller. So now I had bought a piece of real estate by taking over the existing financing. And then this company I was with transferred me from Charlotte to Atlanta. So that transfer caused me to have to sell the first house. And I was able to take that money, parlay it into buying another house where I took over the existing financing. And then I was able to buy a duplex by taking over the existing financing on it and getting the seller to carry back financing. So it became how I started doing business. And then I bought a store, and we inventoried everything in the store and gave the seller 10% down and then 10% interest on everything in the store, and paid her a monthly payment. And we got into the wicker rattan furniture business. I left that company that transferred me to Atlanta, and then I started I sold that business to my partners and carried back financing. And then that gave me an income stream for 2 years that allowed me to get into the business full time. And it was a great thing. So we had a baby when we started the store, and then we had another baby while we had the store. Here we were, a young family, and I just decided, hey, I'm going to do this real estate thing and I'm going to learn what I need to learn. I went to trainings and I did what I had to do. I traveled all over the country to different trainings and got as much education as I could get. And I really started doing the business because I found out something very, very interesting, that you do not have to go to the bank. You do not have to have a credit report at all to do this business.
Mhm.
So fast forward 40 years from when Aunt Mabel said, you need to buy a house. Uh, Even though she went to banks and qualified for loans, I never have. So in my entire career, I've never gone to the bank. I've never qualified for a loan on a single family or small multifamily property. So now, over 1,000 transactions, I discovered you don't need that.
Yeah.
And I discovered that, number one, I could use the magic words. I could say the right things to sellers. I could cause them to allow me to buy their property and cause them to be the bank with certain, let's say, overcoming objections, giving them options and opportunities, solving their problems. I was able to show them how it was beneficial to them to become the bank. So as a result of that, I've discovered that, the typical transaction process of real estate really just is a completely different thing in my world. So I started teaching people how to do that back in 1985. And ever since then, and I found out that I love to teach people, and I found out that I had a gift for teaching. So I just started literally duplicating my business to other people and showing them what to do and how to do it. And the rest is history.
That's such a sticking point for people too, is the banks, is that you can some people just stop, like, when they're especially newer, they're like, "Ugh, I can't go to the bank," and it's like there's so many other options. I wanna back up for a second, kinda go back to 'cause, you mentioned the wicker store and stuff, and so, um, did you know at 18, 19, 20 that, before the wicker store or whatnot, did you know that you wanted to eventually go full-time into real estate, or were you doing it as I don't wanna call it a side hustle, but as your retirement or just kinda growing it to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna do this and build this on the side as I'm building that," and then go into it, or did you just know, "Hey, one day I'm going there?"
It's a great question. And I think in life, especially when you're young, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And and so I didn't really know what my journey was going to be. I knew one thing: I had lived poverty, and I never wanted to do that again.
Mhm.
I knew another thing: I had grown up without a father, and I never wanted to be that for my kids. Meaning, I never wanted to leave them, no matter thick and thin, whatever had to happen. I wanted to be there for my kids, and so I made that commitment that, hey, I'm going to be a father, even though I didn't have one, and even though I didn't even have a grandfather,
Mm.
didn't have anybody to emulate from. But I wanted to be sure and be that for my kids. So that fortunately worked out. 43 years now, I'm married to my wife, and it's a beautiful thing. And I chose the right one. She chose me probably more than I chose her, but definitely it worked out great, and we have wonderful kids as a result.
Yeah. So you just and then eventually kind of went from so I want to hear about the wicker store a little bit. I'm curious because everybody kind of has their, that's something that I never would have guessed. I would never like he owned a wicker store. So kind of tell us about that time period a little bit. What was it that was, were you just like was it an
It was
opportunity that you
interesting
jumped
because
on and then you kind of was it an opportunity that you jumped on and then you kind of said, hey, let's let jump on an opportunity and then it kind of shifted into, like you mentioned, like, okay, it's time to get out. I really want to go there. What was that time period like? Just
well,
how
the
wicker?
evolution was, it was looking for a job, and
Yeah.
I found sales. and I left one company for another company. And that company hired me in Charlotte, North Carolina, and said, we have this territory in Atlanta. You're working out great for us. So we want to transfer you to Atlanta, and we're going to pay your moving, and we're going to pay you. If you sell your house, we're going to pay your closing costs. And if you buy a house in Atlanta, we're going to pay your closing costs. I said, great, it's a deal. So I was able to go ahead and just sell the house. I made a 37% profit in less than 2 years on that house that I bought. And I said, hey, this real estate thing is a really great thing. Meanwhile, I got its job. So I really stood out on that job. I did well. I had parts of 4 states. I traveled. I had a company car, all expenses. I'm still like 21 years old. And here I am, embarking on this journey. So it sure enough worked out. And then while I had that job, I met another guy, and he found this seller that wanted to retire. When I say this seller, I'm talking about this owner of a store. And so we cooked up this idea. And back in the day, there was a thing called the 10-10-10 program, 10% down, 10% interest for 10 years. And that was something I learned while I was learning about real estate. So I said, why don't we do that on this store? So we'll inventory everything in the store, and we'll give the seller 10% down. We'll have her carry back a loan for 10 years at 10% interest. Well, sure enough, she took it. And so it ended up being the two couples went into business together, and we not only had that store, within a year, we opened a second store across town. We started importing wicker and hand furniture. We opened a warehouse. We had like one of these warehouse showrooms. We had 13 employees. It went insane in a year and a half. And we were just doing great. And then I had the opportunity to sell out to them, and I took that opportunity. And because we were working literally 36-hour days, no kidding, staying overnight, working the next day. It was the retail business. It was harrying with 2 small kids and a wife and the whole 9 yards. So we decided to sell. That turned out to be a great move. We got money down, plus we got a 2-year note from my partners. And that gave us a cash flow for 2 years to be able to embark on the real estate journey and really put the blinders on, focus on it, and learn it. And boy, was it a lot harder to learn then than it is now. It's so much easier today than it was back then.
Well, back then too, it was the 80s, so you're talking the interest rates were higher, right? They were not. We get told it all the time. Just
Christopher, you
we're in
wouldn't
our
believe it. Interest rates were 21% when I went full-time in this business. Can you imagine
credit card?
21% interest for mortgages in this country? Crazy, right? Crazy. So yeah, that's when I didn't know any better. Like I said, you don't know what you don't know. And so I was able to buy a duplex by getting the seller to, number one, allow me to take over their existing financing at 8.5%. Number two, they carried back their equity at 12.5%. And that left me a $6.67 cash flow. However, these were back in the days when Reagan got into office, and what he knew is that real estate was a catalyst for the economy. And so he said, okay, we're going to let investors have a 15-year depreciation. And that meant that whatever you bought, man, you could write that off over 15 years. So it was that cool. And so having that job with the company, I had ordinary income, and I said, this is perfect. So even though I don't have much cash flow coming in, I've got cash flow off my job, and I've got this great depreciation write-off that really this cash flow that I'm getting from the job now becomes money in my pocket. So I took advantage of the tax benefits back then, and I was able to kind of circumvent that 21% interest until Reagan truly did get the economy under control and get interest rates to start coming down. It took years to get them to come down from that 21%, but it was a great opportunity that eventually, over a 40-year cycle, came down to what, 2% at one point.
Yeah. So let me ask this: you know, you've talked about, seller finance has been the thing for you. When you started out, was your main? I know just it's not maybe your main thing now, but when you started out, was your main thing tenants and having renters and dealing with that? What did that
Yep.
look like for you? And before you made that those years before you made that transition from removing yourself from that world and going to the next step. But what was that like for you? Just starting out with that. Talk about
It
that a
was
little
a
bit.
torture chamber.
Yeah.
It was it was a torture chamber because, what I didn't understand is that I was the parent and they were the child in that relationship, because I was a child myself. So it was like I was not understanding what it was all about, and that people would lie to you and people would take advantage of you and people would tear up your property. So I had to learn all of that and experience it all. And then I discovered that there was another way to do business. So I got to about 20 properties and I told my wife, I said, "You're going to have to get on this boat and help me row. I need some help. I need some help with the taxes and dealing with all the bookkeeping and the paperwork and all the stuff that goes with this. Entrepreneurs usually not very good with paperwork." And so she said, "Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself." She said, "I have had ADD, I have dyslexia, and I have a learning disability in math and symbols. What do you want me to do, big boy?" The bookwork and the paperwork. And she said, "Well, I can." But she said, "I need you to do it in a systematic way. Don't tell me because I won't hear you." She said, "You got to give it to me in an organized format. You got to give me a filled in version of every document and a blank version of every document. You got to stack them in order. The first one I come to is the first one I use. The second one I come to is the second one you use. I need a cover sheet that explains each one of those documents. Who gets an original? Who gets a duplicate? Does it get recorded? Where does it get recorded? All the details worked out. And then it would be great if you had a scenario that ran through all the documents so that I see a filled in version and then I know how to fill out the blank version. And I'm kind of like following a story through these documents all the way through from start to finish. As soon as you get that done, I'll be glad to help."
She basically said, she's like, "Honey, you got a system. You put systems and processes in your business. Hand them to me, then I'll get it done."
You got it. You nailed it, Christopher. So that's exactly what I did. And my first system way back in the day in like 1984 was on trusts. And I needed to get all of our properties in trust. I had discovered the holy grail of entities that almost no one knows anything about, including the people that were instructing me. They knew about them, but they didn't have the paperwork on them. So I literally had to create from scratch an entire system around getting our properties into trust and then handing that to my wife and saying, "Okay, baby, here it is. It's all digital. You can pull it up on the computer. Here's a filled in version and you can just type it in." And sure enough, that's exactly where my first course came from, was doing it that way. Then I started teaching in 1985, other people in small groups. And then in 1986, and then finally, our RIA asked me to do a big group meeting. We had like over 300 people at my first meeting. And I was teaching them about trusts because nobody was out there with any kind of information about them, really. And so I started teaching people, and then they started begging for the documents. And so sure enough, I had a floppy disk that had the forms on it, and they would shove it in their computer, and then they needed guidance on doing that. So I started teaching classes, and that's how it ended up being a course, because I was able to take all those documents and then create it into a system that, like you said, processes and procedures that other people could duplicate.
Yeah. So you built it for you guys, and then you're like, well, I can share it with others. So how long you said you got to about 20 properties, and you're like, all right, I'm done with this. This is too much.
I
I
need
know Misty's
help.
shaking her head because she's the property manager, our property manager for us, and manages for others. So I know she shakes her head like, yeah, you can babysit plenty of times with
Yes.
people. So, but you got to about 20. So I mean, and then after that, you just said, you started having to create a better way, a different way, and that was so. That was kind of how everything turned out. So kind of go through like I'm curious how many years were you the landlord and then you're like, I'm done. Did you end up keeping some of those, or did you say, hey, you
Oh,
know what, I'm going to or did you take all of those and say, I'm not gonna have any more rentals? Or did you kind of hang on to
well,
a couple rentals for yourself over the years?
around one of my first properties around the corner from where my kids were in their first house. I still have that property, and my son and daughter-in-law live in that property right now. So yeah, it's worked
Awesome.
out.
Yeah. So you've kept a
It
few over the years, but it's not necessarily liquidate everything, but you do keep some.
Well, here's what evolved over time was I discovered that when you're on one side of the table as the landlord and the tenant is on the other side of the table as the tenant, you got this relationship that is not really a cooperative, cohesive relationship for some people.
Yeah.
And so I said, how do I do this where all these things that I don't like maintenance and management and all the different issues that come up, pets and extra people and not paying on time and all the issues that landlords face. I really made a list. Christopher, one night I woke up in the middle of the night. I said, "Thank you, God, for showing me real estate. The only problem is all these problems." And I said, if you can just help me and show me a way that I can get through this, it's going to be an awesome ride. So sure enough, I made a list. I made a list of all the things I hated about this
Mhm.
business and that were challenges, right? And issues and problems that I didn't enjoy. I enjoyed buying properties right and buying properties cheap, but I really didn't enjoy the holding side of things. So I said, how do I get on the same side of the table with these people? And the answer is I created a program called the Path to Home Ownership, where we help deserving families end up with home ownership regardless of credit or financial background. So that became a complete game changer. And what I discovered was there was a whole bunch of people that were renting that would rather not be renting. They would rather be owners. They would rather be buyers of property if they had the opportunity to do so. But I also discovered there was a great number of people that had credit issues. They either had none at all, or they had some interruption in their cash flow, loss of job, medical issues, something set them back. And so when it set them back, they said, this is no fun. And it screwed up their credit. So they didn't put them in a position to be able to qualify with a traditional lender. So I said, what if I became a non-traditional lender? And I actually gave people an incentive to join our program. And I got an incentive out of it as well. Well, sure enough, that was a turning point in our business where we started offering people the opportunity to have a better life than the one they've got. And it has been extremely rewarding, amazing how many people have changed their lives. And yours truly had something to do with that. That is a very wonderful feeling in your life. So then when that worked out for me in my own business, and we've had hundreds and hundreds of residents over the years, I started sharing it with other people. And so I created this brand. It's called Certified Affordable Housing Provider, where we help deserving families end up with home ownership, regardless of credit or financial background. And then I helped people to discover their own personal values. And instead of just being about the money, which some people are in real estate, I discovered there's a whole bunch of people that are about having a better life than the one they've got too. And along the way, they would like to be of service to other people and not just be a landlord. And so I discovered that there's a lot of really great people out there that wanted to have that mission in life. And so now I have licensees of our system in all 50 states and, in fact, in foreign countries as well.
That's awesome. You mentioned the money side of things. I don't know if you would agree, but it seems like freedom is almost more important than money sometimes. That people there's like they may not the money's nice, but the freedom that comes with what they're doing and while they're helping. Because if the more people you help, the more money you make, right? So that's kind of what that it kind of falls on that same sense. Like you get that freedom. They get the freedom to be able to do things and help people at the same time with the program you guys have.
Well,
So,
Christopher, you nailed it. It's absolutely that, meaning you can decide on a daily basis what you want to do that day,
mhm,
and you're not a slave to your business. That's one of the things I discovered as a real estate investor is that I found these landlords that were literally slaves to their real estate,
yeah,
and they had to fix it up, and they had tenants moving out, trashing the place and leaving them in the middle of the night and doing damage. And it just a lot of pain and suffering that could be avoided. And so freedom is exactly what I was looking at when I created that is how do I get freedom? How do I not get enslaved with a bunch of property that otherwise is going to be a problem for me?
mm,
And so imagine now you've got somebody on the same side of the table as you, where they're in this game with you. So now what I do is offer properties as is, and I give people the opportunity to come do some, all, or none of the work. It just depends on where they're coming from. Now, if they agree to do some or all of the work, well, we're going to be giving them a credit towards their down payment. So that means they can come to the table with some cash and work for equity credits. So that means now I can put them in the program that matches their situation. So I created that path to home ownership with levels. So there's rent, rent to own, owner finance, and cash sale. Once
mm,
they have good enough credit, good enough down payment, they can get a new loan from the bank. They can cash us out. So in the meantime, we got more money than we would have gotten as a landlord. We got more money down when they moved in. Number two, we got cash flow while they're living there. Number three, we get a big chunk of money when they pay us off. So we call it bits and pieces and hunks and chunks. So
yeah,
we've got this whole scenario of cash flow that's coming in while the people are living there.
I love it. One thing too, I remember just kind of sitting, when you did one of your presentations at the DFWRI Club, you talked about there's a lot of realtors that can't help these individuals. They get stuck, right? I remember you mentioning that a little bit. Like they just get stuck. They're like, and so we own a brokerage. We own a real estate brokerage and property management and stuff. And there are people that we come across, even just as agents or just as on the leasing side of stuff, where you're like they can't even help that side, but you guys are able to help the other. You're able, you guys are able to help the ones that agents typically can't work
Mhm.
with, and so you guys
Amen.
can help that.
And that's exactly where a lot of our relationships come from is agents find these people, they've got down payment money,
Mhm.
they can afford the monthly, but they cannot qualify at the bank. So agents will bring those people to me, and the agent can earn up to a full commission, a full 3% commission. And I say up to because it depends upon the amount of cash that that customer is bringing to the table when they qualify with us. But as a result of that relationship, that agent is monetizing a lead that they otherwise would have thrown away. And by the way, through their career, have thrown away,
Mhm.
scads and scads of
Yeah,
leads that they could have monetized. So definitely we love being able to create relationships with agents.
So I know that there's so many different ways, and this is what I love about like just because obviously I think everybody goes through stages, right? So Misty and I are in that stage where we're like, we just don't want to sell anything we have. It's kind of where we've been there for a little while. I think we'll end up finally selling one of the properties next year to go bigger. It's always been it's been the cash out refinance, get the next one, cash out, get the next one. Um, but but it's but your stage is different, and you've been doing it way longer as well. And I love that it's different, like, there's different paths to success, and I see that. So, one of the things that Robin I remember we were at lunch one time, and Robin's like, "Explain this to me," talking to someone else about, and I see both sides of it, and I wanna hear kinda your side of it, is some people are like, "Hey, look, I don't ever wanna give this up because I'm gonna lose out the equity," right? That's like they say, "Well, if I sell it, I lose the equity. If I go and sell it to this individual," and others are like, "Well, I don't care about that. I wanna keep I just want the cash flow, and I want that part of it." So what would you I mean, kind of what's your how would you explain that, or, to someone who says
Christopher, what people get stuck in their mind is the price that they paid for something, as if there's no other deals ever again, right?
Mhm.
Like somehow magically you aligned with the universe and you got this deal and it can never be replaced. And I laugh out loud because I know that to not be true. And in fact, I know that from a commodities standpoint, the price that we're paying for homes today is actually lower than what it was in the 70s and 80s. So the when you relate it to commodities.
Mm.
So if you sell a property, it's a blessing because now you've got those funds to be able to replace that property, literally come into the marketplace and buy a new property. If you can buy it below market, even better. Well, we teach stealth buying strategies. So we find deals that we're not in competition with Wall Street. They're not listed on the open market. Nobody knows about them. And that's often how we buy our properties. And in fact, our buyers help us find those properties and they bring them to us. So I'm loving it. If somebody buys a home from me, first of all, I've got an amazing testimonial. I've got pictures, I've got videos. And by the way, we have hundreds of them now from our clients all over the country on our Path to Home Ownership program. So we're helping hundreds of families. Now imagine from a generational standpoint, the impact that that's having, right? That those kids, those grandkids are seeing the parents doing something with their life. They're getting stabilized, stationary in life. They're not just renters, they're owners. They got a piece of the pie, right? And so I like that. I enjoy that. And I know that we're impacting, they say, 7 generations to come. And so, as a result of that, to me, we're actually changing society. We're actually changing how housing is done in America. Now, that's the big visionary
Mhm.
picture, but down to the nitty gritty, where's the money? Am I giving up anything? The answer is no, you are not, because you can replace that property again. The price points that we're paying today, when you actually factor in inflation and everything else, are very commensurate with what they were back in the day. It's just you got to take into account that inflation is the only way that government covers up its messes. So it has to inflate and make things worth, quote unquote, worth more so so that they can cover up all the money and debt that they've created for us to have to pay for.
Oh, it's a
So
big mess.
so inflation is actually oops corrector.
it's, it's exactly right. I make it akin to a cat in a cat box, scraping to
Yeah.
cover up the so, so
We made
the
a mistake,
Federal
man.
Reserve, the Federal Reserve just creates more mess, and because they keep funding Congress, and there's nothing federal or reserve about the Federal Reserve, uh, and so it's a private enterprise, and it's fiat currency.
Yeah.
So I want to get the money out of the bank as quick as possible. I want to get the money into real estate. There's a reason they call it real estate, right? It's
Yeah.
real.
I like that.
So we just call it, trading dollars. But remember this, when my new customer's moving in on that replacement house, they've got a big fat down payment coming in. So if it's $250,000 house and they're qualifying for our in-house financing program, they're bringing 25 grand or more to the table. One of my licensees on this past Sunday night call, he showed a $50,000 check. He's in Las Vegas. He sold them a $485,000 house. He got $50,000 down from the people moving in. That's a beautiful day. And he's making a $1,000 a month cash flow on his cost of funds versus what his new customers paying him. So he's got his $50,000 down, plus he's got $1,000 a month positive cash flow. And that's exactly what I teach, because imagine that you're doing that over and over and over and over again. Well, you can replace the income that you've got from other sources and create that freedom that you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it. Now, by the way, that's a lot of kitty litter the government's got going on at this point in time. Um, so
It would take a lot to cover it up, wouldn't it?
man,
Well, that's what they're doing.
they've still got truckloads coming in.
Just think about what's happened over the last couple of years, right? That
Yeah.
interest rates have not doubled, they've more than doubled, and that the price of homes have doubled.
Mm.
So it's been an amazing thing, but that's what they have to do with the Great Reset, is literally they have to double the price of everything. And you won't notice because it's all happening at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Something I love that you mentioned and you talked about it, because I know we've experienced this and felt this, is that and that's kind of where it came from for us. Was like you spend all that time getting a deal and you don't want to let it go, and so then you're like, I'm just gonna rent this thing forever. And then you start looking around, and you're like, man, okay, maybe this one needs to be let go. That's it's is that it
The
seems like
first place I would start, Christopher, is with the tenants you currently have.
yeah,
We have a 3-page, it's in my House Monster system, but we have a 3-page letter that you write to the tenants you already have and introduce the program to them in writing. And then you call them 2 days later with a script that I have,
mm,
and you start fleshing out what they have to work with and what resources they have. What's interesting is I have like a 10-point checklist of resources that people have that they haven't even thought about. So you and I, we might be thinking off the top of our head, well, these people have no cash. Well, guess what? They might not have cash, but they might have a rich uncle. They might have a grandparent, somebody that would want to see them get ahead in life. They might have an IRA or a 401k that they can borrow from.
mm,
They might have work for equity that they could do on the property and earn credits towards that. So there's so many things. And then we have a credit restoration program that we put our people into so they can get their credit built up so they can qualify for a loan at the bank. And there you just got rid of a property that otherwise you didn't want anyway, and you might have to do a whole bunch of fix up to get rid of it. Well, how about the people that are there?
yeah, having them do it. It's that mental, like, to me was always that, and I know Misty felt that too, where like you spend so much time getting it and then you don't want to let it go. And it seems like we've had just different guests on the podcast, and it's I love hearing the different philosophies and stuff. Everybody has different thought process, and it seems like some people get there faster than others. They're more like, these are like trading cards, whereas you're like, hey, look, I'm out, and others are like, I can't let it go. I can't do it, and so I like hearing, because I think that's so right on, where you're saying, hey, they 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 don't feel like there's enough deals out there, but there is plenty to go by. Whether you just got to search for it, right? I mean,
Oh,
it's
well,
out there.
that's why I said earlier that this business is so much easier than it used to be. Holy cow. Because now I can literally, from the comfort of my home, we have this specialized software that we make available to our students, where basically they can go in and go into a zip code and find all the vacant properties or suspected vacant properties in that zip code. Watch this, that are, let's say, a potentially probate property.
Mhm.
that are non-owner occupied, that are this, that, and the other thing. So we've got like 13 criteria we can stack on top of that inside of a zip code. And as a result of that, we're able to narrow down a list and then push one button and it sends a postcard out to that very narrow fish in the barrel list, so that we can start finding those and generating those leads on properties. But my philosophy is find the buyer first.
Mhm.
So that's what we do with our house monster system, is find this buyer first, vet that buyer. Let's find out how much down payment they have and how much they can afford on a monthly basis and what their resources are and what their credit is. Now let's go find a property for that buyer. And so using the criteria, now we know what we can work with. So if that buyer has 20 grand down, fantastic. That means I've got 20 grand to use as a down payment on the acquisition of that property and still not have anything out of my pocket. So I love that process, because for a lot of people that are just getting started in the business, fear is one of the great impacts and stops people from being able to be successful. The answer is, what if you didn't have that fear? What if you already had a customer and it was your job to simply fill an order? And what if that customer is going to actually go out in the field, drive neighborhoods that they would live in, and then bring you back leads of vacant properties that you don't know anything about? Well, that's exactly what we do, is we put our buyers to work.
Yeah.
We give them a whole list of criteria to look for, and they drive for dollars for us.
I love that. That makes sense. I mean, if I mean, it
And
makes
pay
perfect
you
sense.
for it.
Yeah, it makes. I mean, it makes perfect sense because think about just the times that as realtors and stuff that I know we've drove around with certain buyers or whatnot, and you're like, and we like the buying side of stuff. I enjoy that a lot because I feel
The
like that's where
hunt.
you make your money, right? Yeah, the hunt. You make your money when you buy, not when you sell. So I like that part a lot. But to think, it's kind of like sending them out there and saying, all right, instead of you driving around, like, you go do it. Bring it back to me. I'll send out the
Well,
Tell
postcards.
me what you find.
Yeah.
imagine that you're monetizing that relationship with that buyer at the beginning. So
Yeah.
normally in real estate, we don't get paid till the end or the
Mhm.
very end, right?
Mhm.
And in our relationship, our buyer is actually joining our membership. They're joining our Path to Home Ownership membership. So right away, we're monetizing that relationship. Then we put them into credit restoration. Well, we get paid by that company to put them into the program. So we're already monetizing again. And then the third thing is that they don't have enough down payment money. We put them into our VIP program. So every pay period, they're giving us money. So
Mhm.
that helps us with our cash flow. And then when they are building up towards that required down payment, then we go about finding a property for them. So imagine that you had to have this inventory of buyers. You've got an inventory of buyers that you're making money every single month off of. In fact, every pay period, you're making money
Mhm.
while they're going about and finding properties and bringing them to you.
That's awesome. I like that. That's why right when before we even started or talking today is like your take is so different than what you hear with everyone else. It's completely different. I mean, it's I'm sure others are, some listeners are gonna hear this and be like, man, what? Like if they have never heard of Blue Brown, it's like the take though is so different than what your normal, buy it, hold it, hang on to it for 20 years, you know, cash out, refinance a little bit. Like, but that thought process is awesome. Just to say, hey, you don't have
It's a
to do
game
it.
changer for
Yeah.
sure. The thing that I really enjoy is people looking at it as a career, right? Or
Hmm.
if they're in a career, getting rid of that career and making this their career and getting that very thing you mentioned earlier, and that was freedom.
Yep.
The freedom to do this when they want to grow as large as they want to put as much effort into this as they want to build as large of a team as they want to, because I have people doing this as solopreneurs. I have people doing it as couples, and I have people doing it as full-blown organizations with I'm talking with teams of people, signage, uh, uh, like we do, because we do that. And we have an operation. We have a brick and mortar building where people can come to. They see our signs. They come in. We have wrapped vehicles. Over a dozen of my licensees have wrapped their vehicles, and they have probably 20 of them have offices, maybe more have offices that I don't even know about.
Yeah.
And they're just doing the business. And even real estate agents adopt this brand, the certified affordable housing provider brand, because they realize, hey, not only can I be a real estate agent matching buyer and seller, I can also be an investor, and I can make money off of this myself. So instead of watching other people making money, I can be the one making money.
Mhm.
So I love to work with real estate agents as well.
So let me ask this. I love talking deals. What can you kind of cover? Maybe one of the deals that's the most memorable for you, just over the years that you've
Yeah.
done it, that just sticks out. It doesn't have to be made a lot of money or anything, but it could just be something that's like, I remember
Yeah.
that.
This business is so forgiving. You can make a mistake and
Mhm.
hold on to it long enough, and
Yeah.
it's suddenly not a mistake anymore. Uh, so, I've made mistakes, certainly buying properties in the wrong neighborhoods. And that's one of the reasons that I started and flipped the script and said, let's go find the buyers first and then go about finding a property. So, I've now branched out. I've got properties in 6, 8 states where we're doing long distance investing, and doesn't you don't have the restrictions that you used to have in this business. You used to really, you needed to drive by that property, go inside. There's so many tools at our disposal now that it just makes it so easy to do this business anywhere. But to talk about a deal, let's see. Oh, how about one that's just closing this week? How about that? Where we bought the property right, we bought it cheap. When the downturn happened, I was buying like a banshee, and I told all of my licensees, go out there and buy everything you can get your hands on, pawn things, beg from your rich uncle, get whatever you need to do, get as much as you can, get the cash, because the prices are wrong, and meaning they were too low. And so I bought a house for 25 grand. We're selling it this week for 250 grand.
Mm.
My buyer already has $11,000 in with us. Now she's moving up to our in-house financing program. So she's making up the difference. Now she's going to bring another, 14,000 to the table. She's paying the closing costs on that. And she's qualifying for our in-house financing program, which means you have to have at least 10% down. Where's she coming from? She's moving up from our rent to own program. So we already have money on account with this client. And in fact, she paid a year in advance when she moved in. So we already had that money to work with too. What tenant pays a year in advance? And what tenant gives you thousands of dollars down to move in, right?
Yeah.
Beyond a security deposit. So we get money down. We already have that on account with her. Now we're moving her up. She's bringing another 13 grand to the table. That's a great example. So we paid 25 grand for that house, is selling it for 250 grand, and we're keeping the deed. We sell on agreement for deed, and or also known as contract for deed, bond for deed, land contract. It's the same thing, where basically we don't give them the deed until they pay us off. And it's because of the risk that we're taking, of course, because we're not getting 20% down like the bank. We're getting 10% down when we're in our in-house financing program. Now, if they bring me 20 or 30 or 50% down, like sometimes they do, then we will give them the deed. So it really just depends on how much down they have as to which program we put them into. But that gives you an example of a transaction. Now, if you really looked at how much we've made on that property, it's not 225 grand.
Mhm.
It's all the down payments over the years. It's all the income we've had over the last 10 years on that property. And the fact that, these people, when they get a new loan from the bank, that's when we'll get that differential. We're not getting that differential today, so we're still going to make an income off of that until they get a new loan from the bank and pay us off. So when you start looking at the numbers and you start what I call pancaking, one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other, then you have what's called a beautiful thing.
I love it. That's awesome. So what advice would you give someone who's getting started, or, because, we have some, there's always new investors, right? There's always someone else getting started. What would you give to someone saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm just getting started in this business," and, what would you tell them?
Don't wing it. That's the safest thing you can do if you're going to wing it is do wholesaling, because you're in and out of that transaction without any ownership interest in the property. But if you really want to do this business, you're going to get education. You're going to get the tools, the training, the technology, and the team. And I call it the 4 T's of success. But basically, serious people that really want a multi-million-dollar business do serious things, and they make serious commitments to their future. And those folks, man, they are like songs to me, because I can help them to be able to accomplish that. And so if you're just getting started, you're on a shoestring, no worries. Go bang on doors. It doesn't cost much. You bang on a door, you say, "I'd like to own a house in this neighborhood. Do you know of any for sale?" Then you find that deal, because I promise you, inside of a neighborhood, inside of a community, there's a deal that nobody else knows about. And just by knocking on doors, you will find deals. So if you're starting on a shoestring, you can do that. Then, as soon as you make some money, by see, because I'm on everybody's wholesale list. Christopher, you wouldn't believe this. I can actually show you this. So what I'm doing is going to my phone right now, and I'm going to the contacts, and then I'm typing in the word wholesaler, and then I want to show you this, what comes up. So look at this. Now, you see this? Now,
Oh
you see this?
gosh.
See this? See this? See this?
That's a
You
lot.
see this? You see this?
Yeah,
See this? You see
you
this?
see the little bar too, like
That's
the bar is that small. It's not like that.
those are all wholesalers. Those are all wholesalers right there, right? So I love wholesalers, because people that are just getting started, they haven't learned the rest of the business. They haven't learned what all of you guys have learned today, right here. I beg them to come to my classes too. I just beg them. I say, "This class, I got this class coming up. It'll cost you $37. For God's sakes, come to the class." And they don't
Yeah.
come, because they only know one way to buy, and that's cash, period. That's all they know. So they sit down with a seller, and they make their pitch, and they try to surgically remove the seller from their house, and it doesn't work, and they stand up and walk out, and they got nothing else to talk about. And that's my first offer with a seller, is cash. And then if they don't like that, that's when I get to open my creative financing door, and I have 37 different ways I can structure that deal when they say no to the cash offer, right?
Yeah.
So that is when I shine, and I want that. But definitely somebody who's just getting started, wholesaling is a way that they can do that and get into my phone, get into everybody's phone that buys real estate, and make that spread so that you can invest those dollars in your education and be someone who's making a couple of $100,000 a month in this business, just on cash flow, on dependable, predictable, verifiable, reliable cash flow. That's ultimately what I call the greatest strategy, is to be able to have that dependable, predictable income every month.
Something I want to kind of touch on is that, obviously, because you said your training, right? And so that's such a huge part. And you mentioned earlier that when you first got in the business, traveling all over the place, work, I mean, just soaking it all in, and going after and trying it. I can only imagine the hours and time and effort that it took to be able to put everything together for yourself. I mean, I'm just thinking about things I've tried to build and stuff. I'm like, to me, that's impressive, that to know, like, because obviously if, 40 something years in the business, it didn't start like that, but you had to piece all that training together. There was nobody telling you, hey, Lou, you're like, you've had to figure that out, kind of talk about that a little bit. Cause some people I think get stuck where if they,
Man.
you know what I mean? Like they whatever reason they don't want to those hours. Cause I think of it like instead of 10,000 hours, it's 10,000 iterations. Like how many more times can I just screw this up? How fast can I mess this thing up to get it right? And so when I hear you talk, I think to myself, I'm like, man, I know, the Lou I talked to today is not the Lou that I would have talked to back in the 80s. Like it's a different person. I mean, I can only imagine the amount of times, amount of
Yeah.
iterations you've been through to
Oh
to
man.
to build it.
Well, this is my whole enchilada of real estate.
Yeah.
Right? This is the whole enchilada. And what that really is a collection of mistakes, a collection of what not to do, and then a solution that I would never do that again. I made that commitment early on. When I made a mistake, I said, okay, that happened to me. That tenant said that if I'd had that in my contract, I wouldn't have had that problem. So then I set about, whether it was a word, whether it was a phrase, whether it was a sentence, whether it was a paragraph, whatever it was that would resolve that for the future, I used that and I used it as a learning experience and I built it into my system. Now, my licensees, we meet every year and have that discussion. And we make adjustments to the system so that we're constantly improving, right? We're constantly getting better and better and better. So I have annual trainings on 4 different aspects of the business. Really, there's an overview training, and that gives the buying right, buying cheap, and then holding for maximum income and protecting all that you create using trusts, land trusts, and personal property trusts. And then from that overview training, I go in depth. So then I focus on just the buying side. So for 4 days, everybody is just focused on buying right, buying cheap, 37 different ways to structure the transaction. And then another 4-day event is on the holding and selling side of the business. How to find people, marketing, how to screen those people, what to look for, what are red flags, and what kind of paperwork do you have to have. And then I provide them with structured documents, autofill. You fill out 1 page and it automatically fills out 40 pages of documents, the whole bit. And then on the protecting all that you create, I have a 4-day event on just the concept of trusts, land trust, personal property trust, living trust, the elite trust, the whole 9 yards, and how it fits with LLCs, corporations, limited partnerships, the thing that that is kind of like kindergarten compared to the value of trust. And so I teach people what to do and how to do it that way. And I give each one of those classes 1 time per year. So people come to me, my licensees, and those that want to learn, and they say, okay, and they absorb it and they get all the documents to do it with. They bring live deals to class. We work them in class. It is very interactive. And just love the whole process of people learning that process. But it's learning by doing. So you don't have to know all there is to know. To your point about some people just get frozen in their tracks and they're not, they just aren't able to move forward. Well, we give them bite-sized pieces so they can use it, go out there in the field, make money with it, come back, get some more, go out, make money with it, come back, get some more. So now you're building a true foundation of a multi-million-dollar business.
I love it. I love it. So I got to ask this: trusts. Why trust early on? You said you delved into that, and that was the thing you said. Like you mentioned, like you kind of like drew to it and went through it and just learned everything you could learn. Why so early? I like it, but what was it that made you? Because most people don't even think about
I
it.
was forced to do it, Christopher.
Are you?
How was I forced? Remember how I said when I got started in this business, I was able to take over existing financing without going to the bank,
Yep.
without qualifying for loans? That's exactly what I did. So then the government passed a law, and it was called the Garn St. Germain Federal Depository Institutions Act of 1982. So in 1982, they took away my baby. They stole my baby, which was to come in and take over existing financing for $45. Oh my gosh, they took it away from me. So then I went and read that law, and all 1701 J3D 8C, way deep in the law, I found the exception
Mhm.
that whenever someone places their own property into trust for estate planning purposes, essentially, the lender is prohibited from calling the loan due. Hello. So they
Yeah.
gave them the right to put the due upon sale clause in the mortgage. And then they gave the exception that if you put your own property in there, the lender can't call the loan due. So what do? I have sellers place their property into trust, and I don't buy the real estate. I buy the beneficial interest of the trust. And I use a different trust to buy that beneficial interest. So as a result, we are in compliance with what the law says, and we have the benefits of that trust. All of them, 100% of the benefits of that trust have been purchased by another trust. And so I teach that, and I teach people how to avoid going to bank. Now, just think about one single loan. If you went to the bank qualifying for a $250,000 loan, you're going to spend well over $10,000 to do that loan. That one single loan, you're going to spend over $10,000, and depending on credit, it could be a lot more. So now I can come in to a seller, I can structure a transaction, take over their existing financing on that property, and save that 10 grand or more on each one of my transactions. Because remember, I've never been to the bank and I've never qualified for a loan. So that's my plan, is to go in and take over any existing financing that they have.
Yeah. I love it. So you just had to go deep into trusts once the government said nope, and that was
And then what did I find out? It's the best entity on the planet, bar none.
yeah.
The others don't even come close to the benefits of trust. And then I started getting into it. I said, wait a minute. Not only can I take over existing financing, I can protect myself. I don't have to have my name on public record, become a complete target like so many landlords are, where they got their all list of everything they own right there on public record for anybody to see. And they can just come in and take their stuff, literally just make them a target and come after them. So I said, this is the best thing ever, because this little known thing called land trust was even better. So now we take the subject of trust, narrow it down to a particular type of trust. And now I can do things inside of a land trust that I can't do inside of other types of trusts. So one of them is I can have each property in its own trust. So now I've got that huge benefit of being able to separate and segregate my assets from one another.
Mm.
And so now any liability that may happen in this trust is not going to infect or affect this trust. And so many more benefits. For example, probate avoidance. You know, if somebody dies, you have to go through this thing called probate, and that involves courts and judges and delays and expenses and upsets and breakdowns and confusion and confounding, and all of that stuff is eliminated with this wonderful thing called a trust, where it literally, at the death of the beneficiary of the trust, it passes to the successor beneficiary. No courts, no judges, no attorneys, no expense, nothing. It's instant. Now, if that's not enough reason for somebody to get excited about trusts, then they missed the point. This is the best thing ever.
I love it. I love it. Well, man, uh, can you share with the audience how they can get it, either get a hold of your program, or get in contact as far as programs and stuff, and what they can do if they want to get involved and learn and how do they
That's
connect?
Christopher. I appreciate that. Well, definitely, I would love to see you guys and visit me at streetsmartinvestor.com, where you can see kind of the story about what we're doing and how we're doing it. If you want to know more about Certified Affordable Housing Provider, you'd go to certifiedaffordablehousingprovider.com. If you'd like to have a free book on trusts, go to maximumassetshield.com/book, BOOK. And that will give you a free downloadable book, or you can have us ship you one right there at Maximum Asset Shield. By the way, that's where you can find out more about trusts and about the upcoming class that I have on trusts. And oh gosh, we've got other sites like if you want to hire me to be a speaker or to come to your RIA or whatever, you can go to lewisbrown.com. And if you'd like my book, Doing Good While Doing Well, you can go to doinggoodbook.com, doinggoodbook.com, and download a free book. How about that?
I love it, man. I love it. Sounds good. Well, Lou,
Also,
thank
we
you.
have an
Yeah.
800 number, by the
Yep.
way, if all else fails, it's 800-578-8580. That's 1-800-578-8580. So we got it all.
I love it, man. Well, Blue, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge. Definitely, as always, Misty and I, the first time we got to listen to you speak, we were like, he's an awesome speaker, man. He's great at what he does. I remember it was, what was it? Uh, yeah, baby. He didn't do it today, though. He didn't do it today, but Misty
I
looked
was
at me.
getting around to it. That's what I would have ended with.
Oh, he was getting to it. That was one of my favorites. Like, yeah, baby, the Austin Powers. So yeah, but
Everybody loves me. Nobody forgets yeah, baby, and nobody forgets the whole enchilada.
yeah. Oh, I remember the whole enchilada too. I was like, yep, the whole enchilada. I'm thinking to myself about I knew that term and so I was like, he's gonna say a whole enchilada one time at least. I love it. I love it. Well, Lou, thank you for coming on. I'm glad we got to connect and I appreciate it. And guys, if you again, I love his take on it. If it's something that, being a landlord and you don't like that stuff, no tenants, toilets, or trash. I mean, Lou's your guy, man. Him and his program can help greatly and put you into a different aspect of real estate that most people don't think about. So thank you, Lou. I appreciate it for coming on and hopefully have you back on another time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to, touch base with all your folks. I'm looking forward to seeing every one of you guys. Definitely tell me you came from Christopher's story and you got the real story on his website, right?
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, baby. Good stuff. Awesome.
Thank you, Lou. Have a good one. I appreciate it, man.
All right. Take
Thank
care.
you.
See you soon.
Later, guys.
Miss-
Everybody, y'all have a good one. Good. We'll catch you guys in the next episode.